The morning of March 27, 2025, broke over Washington with the kind of sticky, pre-storm humidity that makes marble sweat and tempers fray before the first gavel even falls. By 9:42 a.m. the Longworth House office building's basement barbershop was already buzzing, not with the usual gossip about who was sleeping with whose chief of staff, but with one question whispered between hot towels and straight razor shaves: "You watching Oversight today?" Crockett said she's done playing. Upstairs, in the Rayburn Room 215, the air conditioning had lost its annual fight with 200 human bodies, 15 television cameras, and the collective heat of 4 years' worth of unprocessed political trauma. The room smelled like burnt coffee, panic, and whatever cologne Jim Jordan bathes in. James Comer took the dais looking like a man who had practiced his opening statement in the mirror and still managed to mispronounce his own name. His tie was the color of weak bourbon, and his forehead had already surrendered to the shine. He banged the gavel 3 times, the way a toddler bangs a plastic hammer, hoping noise equals control, then launched into a 5-minute soliloquy that somehow blamed Hunter Biden for both inflation and the designated hitter rule. The Republican side of the dais nodded along on muscle memory. Lauren Boebert had smuggled in a Yeti tumbler the size of a small child and was stress-sipping something that was definitely not water. Anna Paulina Luna kept checking her Apple Watch like she had somewhere more important to be, which she didn't. Byron Donald sat perfectly upright, the only black man in America who still believed being the reasonable Republican might one day save him from the mob he'd hitched his wagon to. Across the aisle, the Democrats looked like they had taken a vote and decided today was the day the gloves came off for good. Jamie Raskin had brought 2 legal pads, one labeled Constitutional Arguments, and the other labeled Petty. AOC's phone was propped against a water pitcher, already live streaming to 1.4 million people with the caption, "Bring popcorn, no thoughts and prayers." Ayanna Pressley's bald head gleamed under the lights like a quiet warning. Robert Garcia had a bowl of flamin' hot Cheetos he kept offering to Republican staffers who looked close to defecting. And at the far end, Jasmine Crockett sat perfectly still, legs crossed, manicure sharp enough to slice bread, scrolling through her phone like she was waiting for a late Uber instead of the end of someone's whole political identity. Marjorie Taylor Greene stood first, because Marjorie Taylor Greene believes the world was created for her to stand in. She was wearing a white blazer 2 sizes too small and the facial expression of someone who had just discovered the word reparations and decided it was a personal hate crime. In her right hand she clutched a foam core poster the size of a kindergarten art project, this one featuring a shirtless Hunter Biden photoshopped onto the body of Scar from The Lion King, because subtlety is a coastal elite value. She demanded a point of personal privilege before Comer had even finished clearing his throat, claiming that Representative Crockett's gold bamboo earrings were clearly a gang signal for the MS-13 Antifa cartel. The room tittered. A freshman Republican from Alabama actually whispered, "Are those the doorknocker kind?" "My mama said those are hood." Crockett didn't flinch. She simply looked up, slow as Sunday morning, and said, "Baby, these are from the Target on I-35 in Dallas. Season 4, clearance rack. You couldn't afford the trauma that produced this drip." Comer, desperate to regain whatever control he'd never actually had, recognized Greene for 5 minutes to discuss matters of urgent national importance. Greene used all 5 to scream about Jewish space lasers, Ukrainian biolabs that only attack red states, and the fact that eggs now cost more than her first divorce. She ended by pointing a manicured finger across the aisle and snarling that the Democrats were the real fascists because they wanted to take away her gas stove and her AR-15 and her God-given right to mispronounce infrastructure. Boebert started slow clapping like she was at a Trump rally and nobody had the heart to tell her this wasn't one. When Comer finally turned to the minority side, he did it with the enthusiasm of a man handing over a live grenade. The chair recognizes the gentle lady from Texas for 5 minutes. Crockett stood. Not fast, not slow, just inevitable. She buttoned the single button on her crimson blazer, the one that matched the exact shade of "I wish you would," and walked to the microphone like it had been waiting for her since 1789. She didn't open a folder. She didn't look at notes. She looked straight at Greene the way your auntie looks at you when you come home with a tattoo of your ex's name. "Let me make sure I understand the rules we're playing by today," she began, voice soft enough that every camera in the room leaned in. "Y'all can bring poster boards of a sitting president's son in his birthday suit. Y'all can scream about weather weapons and Italian satellites and whatever new conspiracy theory you printed off the internet this morning. Y'all can call the gentle lady from Minnesota a terrorist, the gentle lady from New York a bartender like that's an insult, and the gentle lady from Massachusetts bald-headed like she didn't choose this sleigh. But the second a black woman from Texas says one word about consequences, suddenly we need to talk about decorum. She paused just long enough for the silence to get nervous. Let me help everybody who missed the memo in 2016 when the rules apparently stopped mattering. Y'all spent 4 years telling us to own the libs and fuck your feelings and stop being snowflakes. Y'all put children in cages and called it border security. Y'all watched a man incite an insurrection on live television and then voted to overturn the election before the blood was dry on these walls. Y'all turned the people's house into a spirit Halloween of white grievance and called it patriotism. And every time somebody asked you to maybe pump the brakes, y'all said elections have consequences like it was your daddy's catchphrase. She took one step closer to the Republican side. The temperature in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. Well, congratulations. You won some elections. And now the consequences are here. Judge Chutkan is on the bench. Fani Willis has receipts. Letitia James brought a calculator. Jack Smith brought a whole damn library. And 12 citizens of the state of Georgia are about to decide whether your little coup attempt was just boys being boys or the biggest RICO case since John Gotti. This, my colleagues, is not oppression. This is physics. This is what happens when you spend 8 years fucking around. You finally get to find out. She let the last 2 words hang in the air like smoke after a gunshot. Somewhere in the gallery a woman screamed, "Say it again," for the cheap seats in the back. C-SPAN's cheering glitched, froze, then displayed in all caps, "R.E.P. Crockett, MAGA is in the find-out phase." The stenographer typed so fast her fingers left scorch marks on the keyboard. Greene tried to interrupt, something about bleach and respect, but Crockett turned on her with the speed of a woman who has ended bloodlines with less. "Oh, you want to talk about bleach? Honey, I was born with this melanin. You have to pay monthly for that struggle blonde. And as for your body, ma'am, Planet Fitness called, they want their February free trial mascot back." The gallery lost its collective mind. AOC had to cover her mouth to keep from snort laughing on camera. Even Dan Goldman, who once prosecuted mob bosses without cracking a smile, had to look down at his legal pad to hide the fact that he was crying laughing. Comer banged the gavel so hard the head flew off and hit Greg Stube in the forehead. Order. Order. The gentle lady will suspend. Crockett just smiled, sweet as iced tea with extra arsenic. "Mr. Chairman, I'm happy to suspend. I've been suspended since the day I was born black in these United States. You'll get used to it." She sat down to a standing ovation that lasted so long the speaker pro tempore had to threaten to clear the chamber. 23 minutes later the Republican cloakroom looked like the losing team's locker room after the Super Bowl, except nobody had the dignity to cry in the shower. Boebert was on FaceTime with her mother, insisting she had not been ejected yet while simultaneously Googling, "Can you conceal carry in the Capitol if you're having a really bad day?" Jim Jordan was doing burpees in his suit because cardio is how he processes shame. Nancy May stood in front of a mirror practicing how to pronounce, "I'm a survivor," in case she needed it for the evening news cycle. Byron Donalds kept trying to call a caucus meeting and nobody would make eye contact with him. Mike Johnson walked in clutching a Bible and a bottle of hand sanitizer, looked around at the chaos, whispered, "Lord give me strength," and immediately walked back out. Greene sat on a leather sofa that had seen better decades and possibly better centuries, mascara running down her cheeks like cheap watercolor. "She called me butch," she kept repeating, as if the word itself were a federal crime. Luna tried to comfort her by showing her the trending hashtag #BBBBBB, which had already spawned 400,000 tweets, a SoundCloud remix, and at least 3 Etsy stores. "It's alliteration," Luna offered weakly. "People love alliteration." Greene just screamed into a throw pillow that probably cost more than most Americans' rent. At 7:42 p.m. the House floor was mostly empty, just the night shift pages, the C-SPAN crew running on Red Bull and Spite, and the ghosts of better legislatures past. Jasmine Crockett took the center aisle wearing the same crimson blazer, now unbuttoned because the day had earned the right to breathe. She asked for and received 1 hour of special orders. She would use 7 minutes and 32 seconds, and every single one of them would be carved into the marble of American political memory. She began by thanking the ancestors out loud, by name, Sojourner, Ida, Fanny, Shirley, Barbara, Maxine, then thanked her mother, who had taught her that you do not bring a hymn to a gunfight. She thanked the voters of Texas's 30th district for sending her here to do more than warm a seat. Then she turned to the camera the way a preacher turns to the amen corner when it's time to stop playing and start slaying. "I need America to understand something real clear tonight," she said. "This is not revenge. Revenge is personal. This is accountability. Accountability is what happens when a nation finally grows tired of pretending that rules are optional for some and mandatory for the rest. Accountability is January 6 defendants learning that Trump will pardon me is not a get-out-of-jail-free card. Accountability is fake electors discovering that forgery is still a crime even when you do it for Jesus and white supremacy. Accountability is a former president discovering that Article 2 does not say the criminal immunity clause, brought to you by Carl's Jr. She pulled a thick stack of indictments from her folder, indictments, subpoenas, sentencing memos, the paper trail of a movement that mistook chaos for power, and let them fall to the floor one by one. Each sheet fluttered down like ash from a burning Confederate statue. You don't get to try to end democracy on a Wednesday and then demand unity on Thursday. You don't get to spend 4 years calling everyone else snowflakes and then melt the second the heat finds you. You don't get to scream, "fuck your feelings" for half a decade and then ask for a safe space when the jury foreman says, "guilty on all counts." She took one final step forward until her forehead almost touched the lens. So go ahead. Cry harder. Post through it. Threaten to primary anyone who admits the sky is blue. Bleach your hair, build your body, clutch your pearls, pray your little prayers. It will not slow down what's coming. Because the find-out phase is not a moment. It's a movement. And movements, unlike feelings, have consequences. She let the silence settle for 3 full beats, long enough for every American watching to feel it in their chest. "I yield back the balance of my time," she said, "and every last one of your excuses." The gavel never fell. The speaker pro tempore was too busy trying not to applaud. Somewhere in the control room a producer whispered, "Roll that back, we're making that the cold open for the next 10 years. In the hallway outside, Ayanna Pressley and AOC were waiting with a bottle of champagne they definitely weren't supposed to have. Pressley hugged her so hard the blazer wrinkled. AOC showed her the merch mock-up that had already raised $400,000 in pre-orders, a silhouette of Crockett dropping the indictments, captioned "Simply Find Out" in crimson letters. Crockett laughed the laugh of someone who had come to Washington expecting to write laws and accidentally wrote scripture instead. She slipped on sunglasses even though it was night, even though they were underground, even though the only light came from camera phones and the glow of a nation that had just remembered what courage sounds like. "Tell them the South is still rising," she said, voice low and lethal and loving all at once. "Only this time we brought receipts." And somewhere, in courtrooms from Atlanta to Manhattan to D.C., the printers started humming again. Because the find-out had only just begun, and she was 5 feet of Texas thunderstorm with a law degree and absolutely no more patience left to give.